The dinner rush at Vano and Veritas had barely begun when Elena heard the words that froze her in place. "Don't react." The warning came from a busboy passing behind her. Low, shaky, almost swallowed by the clatter of crystal and silver. Elena turned just enough to see his face go pale as his eyes flicked toward a man at table 4. A glint of metal. A jacket shifted. Thread taking shape. Her throat tightened. She needed this job. She needed to stay invisible. But when Lorenzo Moretti, the man everyone feared but no one dared approach, looked up and caught her stare, something inside her broke. She set the wine bottle down, leaning close enough for only him to hear. "Table 4 isn't here to talk," she whispered. "Someone brought a gun." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but the air around him did. Heavy. Dangerous. "Show me," he murmured. And in that single moment, the quiet life Elena fought to protect began to unravel. What happens next will turn the entire underworld upside down. If you're hooked already, like this video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales for more gripping stories. The moment Lorenzo whispered, "Show me," the restaurant's warmth evaporated. Elena stepped half a pace aside, enough to reveal the angle she'd caught earlier. Table 4, the forced smile, the stranger's hand resting too close to his jacket. Lorenzo didn't react with the sharpness she expected. Instead, he leaned back, the calm of a man too familiar with danger. "Keep walking," he murmured. "But don't leave the room." Elena nodded, forcing her breath steady as she retreated toward the service station. Her hands trembled only when she was no longer in his eye line. She had survived on instinct her entire life, but tonight, instinct alone felt thin. Something heavier pressed against her ribs, a strange blend of fear and responsibility she had never asked for. Carlo, the floor manager, snapped his fingers. "What are you doing just standing there? Table 7 needs water." Elena didn't turn. "Carlo," she whispered, "do not step anywhere near table 4. He scoffed. "Since when do you give orders?" But he didn't move forward. Something in her tone, tight, clipped, almost strangled, forced him to pause. That was all she needed. She slipped past him, pretending to refill a tray of wine glasses while watching Lorenzo through the mirrored shelves. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the man across from him, studying every blink, breath, gesture. A soft voice drifted near her elbow. "You okay?" It was Maya, another waitress. Warm-hearted, always smiling even on the worst shifts. Maya's brows furrowed, noticing Elena's trembling hand. "No," Elena whispered. "But I need you to stay by the kitchen. Don't ask why." Maya hesitated, then nodded and moved. Elena returned to the dining floor, this time slower, deliberate, letting her presence become part of the room without pulling attention. The stranger at table 4 lifted his glass, and that's when she saw it. The second man, seated alone 2 tables away, shift in the same rhythm. A mirrored gesture. A silent countdown. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to eliminate. The restaurant's piano drifted into a softer melody, masking the tension rising in her chest. She moved toward Lorenzo again, using the pretext of checking on his table. As she approached, his eyes flicked to the mirrored stranger. He had seen the signal too. "Elena," he said quietly, "sit." "I'm working," she replied. "You're sitting," he insisted. "Now." His voice left no room for refusal. She slid into the booth beside him, heart pounding. From this angle she could see what he saw. 2 men positioned to trap him in a crossfire if he stood. The way the exit paths lined up perfectly with their vantage points, the slight tilt of their chairs. "Why me?" she whispered almost to herself. "Because you saw the threat first," he answered. "And because if something happens, I know you won't freeze." She didn't know whether to feel insulted or honored. He lifted his glass and spoke louder. "You served this beautifully. Tell me, was the vintage hard to open?" To anyone listening, it sounded like casual conversation. But his eyes held a question. "Where are they? How many? Who else is involved?" Elena breathed in slowly. "Some bottles are difficult," she said. Some require more force, especially when two people are trying to open them at once. His jaw tightened. He understood. Two attackers. Coordinated. And the cork, he asked. It holds pressure. Sometimes too much. Another message. They're close, ready to act. A faint smirk touched his lips, the expression of a man who'd survived too many near-deaths to be impressed by another. But under that, Elena caught something else. Gratitude and perhaps the slightest hint of trust. Then, like a spark touching dry tinder, everything shifted. The stranger at the mirrored table reached into his coat. Elena didn't think, she moved. Her hand shot across the table, knocking Lorenzo's fork to the ground. The sharp clatter rang through the restaurant just as she lifted the replacement fork and laid it across the napkin at a precise angle, perpendicular to the knife. Enemy. Imminent threat. Signal from the old language of shadows she had tried to forget. Lorenzo saw it. His pupils narrowed. Down. The word was barely a breath. Rose. The attackers rose. Chairs scrape. Guests gasp. But Lorenzo was faster. He kicked his heavy chair backward, flipping it into the path of the man behind him. At the same time, Elena dove beneath the table as a second attacker lunged toward the aisle. The restaurant erupted, not with gunfire, but with bodies scrambling, plates falling, screams rising in waves. Lorenzo grabbed Elena by the wrist and pulled her behind a column. His voice was low, steady, terrifyingly controlled. You stay with me. I didn't plan to leave, she snapped, more bravely than she felt. He peered around the column, assessing angles, exits, numbers. They weren't hired to scare me. They were hired to disappear me. Why? That, Lorenzo said, is a much longer story. Before he could finish, one of the attackers lunged across a table toward a guest. Lorenzo grabbed a serving tray from a nearby station and hurled it, knocking the man off balance. Without waiting for applause or panic, he pulled Elena toward the kitchen hall. Carlo popped out from behind a counter, white as flour. What did you do? Why are there men? Lorenzo stepped forward, his voice a blade. Out of my way. Carlo backed up instantly. Elena seized Lorenzo's arm. If you go through the kitchen, you'll be cornered. He paused. Then where? The back wine corridor. There's a service stairwell that leads to the alley. Lorenzo stared at her. How do you know that? She swallowed. I study escape routes. It was only half a lie. She had memorized every corner of this restaurant because she had grown up needing to know how to leave any room quickly. Lorenzo didn't question further. He grabbed her hand and they ran. The corridor lights flickered as they passed, their footsteps echoing over the tile. Behind them, voices barked in agitation, searching, splitting up. The stairwell was colder than the dining room, a sharp draft rising from the alley. As soon as they stepped outside, the hum of the city swallowed them. Traffic rushing, a siren far away, the rattle of someone dragging crates across the pavement. They had seconds, maybe less. Lorenzo pressed her against the brick wall, his breath visible in the night air. Who sent you the signal? No one, she said. I saw their movement and... He cut her off. You knew coded placement. The old style. The kind nobody uses anymore. So tell me, Elena, where did you learn that? Her throat tightened. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not now. Maybe never. Does it matter? She whispered. They wanted you dead. And you saved me. He stepped back, studying her with a gaze that felt like a searchlight cutting through fog. That puts me in your debt. But it also means anyone after me is now after you. Elena straightened. I'll manage. No, Lorenzo said. You won't. Not alone. A car screeched to a stop at the end of the alley. Not the attacker's vehicle. This one was sleeker, darker, moving with intention. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. My driver. You planned this escape. I plan for everything. He opened the rear door. Get in. Elena froze. I have a brother to pick up. A life outside this. You had a life, he corrected quietly. But the moment you warned me, it changed. The door remained open. She could run. She could fight. She could refuse. But she had already stepped into the storm. She got into the car. The city blurred as they pulled away, headlights slicing through the wet pavement. Lorenzo picked up his phone, barking orders in sharp Italian. His voice carried authority, but something else lingered beneath, the recognition that tonight had shifted far more than his enemy's plans. Finally he ended the call. Silence settled over them, heavy, expectant. Lorenzo turned to her. You have two choices now. Hide or help me end this. Elena met his gaze, the reflection of streetlights flickering across her eyes. I'm tired of running. A faint smile touched his lips. Good. Outside, the city swallowed their trail, unaware that inside a speeding black sedan, alliances were forming that would soon reshape old rivalries. And somewhere behind them, the man who had triggered the attack, the architect of the betrayal, was already feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. Because he had underestimated a waitress. And he had underestimated the man she chose to save. By morning he would learn the cost of that mistake. And he would not escape it. When dawn finally touched the city, Elena stood at the quiet edge of the alley where everything had changed. The night's chaos had settled, but its echoes stayed with her. Each choice, each risk, each truth she could no longer hide from. She wasn't the woman who once slipped between tables hoping to go unnoticed. She had stepped into danger, faced betrayal, and refused to let fear decide her life. Lorenzo joined her without a word. For the first time she saw something rare in his expression. Respect, not command. You could have walked away, he said. I think I stopped running a long time ago, she answered. And she meant it. Survival had shaped her, but now it no longer defined her. Strength wasn't in the shadows she escaped. It was in the truth she chose to hold on to, even when the world around her shook. As they turned toward the brightening street, a single silver fork glinted on the ground, catching the morning light. A reminder of how a small act, guided by courage, had altered everything. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales so we can keep bringing powerful journeys like this to life.